Welcome back to the Writing with Power workshop series with your friend and neighbor, Michelle. We are now into week 4. That means that this is the culmination of all your weeks of hard work in doing these writing tasks. Today, your task is to write your final report. So the documents you should have in front of you right now, there should be about 5 of them. And they are, first of all, this week's packet, the week 4 Writing with Power worksheet packet entitled Revising, Writing Your Final Report. The next thing you should have in front of you is all of your packets from the previous week. So this includes week 1, week 2, and week 3. In these packets, you'll have that outline that you created in week 1, your first draft that you created in week 2, and your second draft that you created in week 3. And on your week 3 draft, that second rough draft that you did, I've written corrections and suggestions for spelling and grammar. So when we do our task today, when we get into the worksheet packet, I will guide you step by step on how to identify some of those common grammar mistakes and how to correct them. So that's the second thing you should have in front of you, are your packets from the previous weeks. The third thing you should have in front of you is this worksheet, or it's not a worksheet, it's a guide, and it's called The Use and Non-Use of Articles. And articles are those short words before a noun, and, some, and the. So this is a guide of what situations, when to use it, when to not use them. The fourth thing you should have in front of you is a list of the common irregular verbs that you find in English. And this sheet is really nice because it has the 3 different forms of these irregular verbs. The first one is your base form. The second one is simple past. And the third form is the past participle. The last thing you should have in front of you is this guide for subject verb agreement. So this will help you go through each sentence and making sure that you're using the right form of the verb to match the subject that you have in your sentence. So those are the items you should have in front of you. I think we're ready to start the week 4 task of writing your final report. So make sure you have all your papers in front of you, and let's get started in the week 4 worksheet packet. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, here is your week 4 Writing with Power worksheet packet. And what we're going to be doing today is writing your final report. We'll be going back over the tasks that you did in the previous weeks and looking at all of the edits, incorporating those into your final report so that you have a client-ready, polished, error-free report to submit. So what we've already done in week 1, that's when you did your outline. Week 2 is where you wrote your first rough draft. Week 3, you wrote your second rough draft, and this is where you use the editing tips that I provided about content, how to organize your ideas so that it was very clear, consistent, and concise for your reader. Today, in week 4, we're doing your final revision. So in this one, I've taken a look at your second rough draft, and I've focused specifically on grammar and spelling. This is the form. Last week we focused on content. This week we're working on actual form and sentence structure. So I hope all of you have your laptops in front of you, because this final report you're going to be typing on your laptops. This will give you a chance to use Microsoft Word and all of the functions that it has with spell check and grammar check. So just to make sure you have everything in front of you that you need, here are the items you should have. So you should have your marked week 1, 2, and 3 worksheet packets, your laptop, the subject verb agreement handout, and that is the one that looks like this. The other handout you should have is your article use handout. That looks like this. And then the last handout you should have is the irregular verbs, and that one looks like this. So let's go back to your worksheet packet and we'll get started. So if you take a look at your week 3 worksheet packet and that second rough draft, I have put feedback on there. Not only have I marked specific grammar and spelling items, but I also have let you know what your most common grammar error is so that you can focus on that. So here's where I want you to take a moment, look at the feedback that I've provided on your second rough draft, and look at what I have identified as your most common grammar error. And so let's just go into what exactly are those grammatical errors. So the definition of a run-on sentence is it is 2 or more independent clauses that aren't connected properly. And the expression run-on sentence, it's kind of like it's a marathon runner that doesn't know where the finish line is. It just keeps going and going and going. So a run-on sentence, you want to be very clear about where the beginning of your sentence is, where the end of your sentence is, and if you have 2 different independent clauses, how to make sure that you're connecting them properly. So here's an example of an incorrect way of putting together 2 clauses. The results of the study were inconclusive. More research needs to be done. I've only put a comma there and it's inadequate. We need to put something different there. So here's the 3 common ways that you can fix it. The first one is the one that I recommend. Keep it simple. The easiest way to separate 2 clauses is to make them into separate sentences. So here's what we've done. The results of the study were inconclusive, period, capital letter, more research needs to be done. If you have any doubt on how to get rid of run-on sentences or separate out those independent clauses, just chop them up into shorter, more simple sentences that follow the format of subject, verb, subject, verb. So then those next 2 are a couple more examples on how you can connect those 2 independent clauses. You can connect them using a semicolon, a transition word, and a comma, or you can connect them with a comma and a conjunction. The next common mistake that we saw were segment fragments. So here's an example. A sentence fragment is a group of words that it doesn't form a complete sentence. Usually there's something missing. And many times that may be the noun or the subject is missing, or the verb is missing, or the sentence doesn't express a complete idea. So here's an example of an incomplete sentence fragment. Participated in job readiness training for 6 weeks. Who participated in job readiness training? So how we correct that is by simply putting the subject. Who participated? The interns participated in job readiness training for 6 weeks. Another example of a sentence fragment, and this one is a bit longer. The interns who were placed with different government agencies that increased their exposure to a wide variety of public service projects, which was leadership. That's unclear because this last part here doesn't finish the sentence. It doesn't give a verb and show what these interns were doing. So the way that we corrected that one was by having the same form as before. The interns who were placed with different government agencies that increased their exposure to a wide variety of public service projects improved their leadership skills. Here you have a very clear verb identifying what the interns were doing. The next sheet you have is article use. And especially with English language learners, sometimes I feel that English language learners might have a difficult time figuring out where to put an article and when to leave it out. So here are some examples here. The intern was placed with government agency in Herat. We need to have an indefinite article in front of that. And here's another one. Purpose of job readiness training is to prepare the interns for permanent employment. We need a definite article on that. The purpose of job readiness training is to prepare the interns for permanent employment. So the worksheet or the guide that I've given you on article use should explain what situations you need to be using articles and in what situations you need to be leaving them out. The next grammar point that we're going through is the subject-verb agreement, and this is where I've given you that guide for subject-verb agreement, and this will help you identify what verb goes with what kinds of subjects. So to simply state it, a plural subject needs a plural verb, a singular subject needs a singular verb. So here's an example. The child, this is a singular subject, go to daycare center every afternoon? No, the child goes to the daycare center every afternoon. And here's another common one is words like everyone, anyone, no one, someone. All of these are treated as singular nouns. So this is incorrect. Everyone receive? No, we need to have everyone at the Ministry of Education receives training in leadership development. The next grammar point is verb tense. So you'll want to refer to your irregular verbs handout. What I see in reports like the ones that you're writing, you're going to really be using mostly 4 common verb tenses. And these are present simple, present progressive, past simple, and present perfect. So I'll briefly go over what those verb tenses are. And these should be a review from when you were taking English language classes before. And we'll take a look at when you use them. So present simple, this is used to express habits, general truths, and repeated actions. So she gets up early every morning. This is a habit. They live in Kabul. This is an unchanging situation. Afghanistan is a war-torn country. This is a general truth. So read through the different examples that they have of when to use present simple, but be careful. The simple present is not used to express actions that are happening right now. So if an action is happening right now, here's where you'll be using present progressive. So when you're going to be using present progressive, this is the ing form of the verb. So it has the be verb and then the ing form. We'll use it to describe an incomplete action which is already in progress at the moment. And we use this with time expressions such as at the moment, right now, now. So here's a good example of what kind of sentence you might be using in your report. Right now, 300 interns are working in government offices throughout Kabul. So this is telling the reader that this is the current status of what is happening right now, and it's not complete. Maybe these interns will stop working at these government offices in the future. Maybe more interns will start working. So this is still an action that's in place that is incomplete. We also use the present progressive to describe plans for the future and for things. This is one of the things I don't recommend you use very often. This is using it in a negative connotation. So if you say, oh, her husband is always complaining about his health, it's a negative connotation. Usually when you're saying always or forever with the present progressive, you're stating something in a negative way. The next verb form that we use a lot of is the past simple. And the past simple tense is used to talk about a completed action in the past, and this is where you have a clear time of when it was completed. So here are some examples here. 200 participants received job training in 2018. Because you say this time in 2018, that year is in the past, so we know that that action is completed. Here again, her father died last year. That's a completed action. Breakfast is over. I ate scrambled eggs for breakfast. And we interviewed several candidates for the position. You're not using a time expression there, but you're saying that this is an action that you have completed. A simple rule that you use with past simple is that if you say when it happened, you will have to use the past simple because you're talking about when that action was completed. And then finally, the last form of the verbs that you'll be using usually are present perfect. And present perfect is very commonly used in English because it is indicating something that started in the past and is continuing up to the present moment. We use the present perfect to describe actions that started in the past and continue the present, an action that was performed that's not yet finished, or even a repeated action in my life that I've done several times, but I haven't said exactly when I did it. So we have visited Portugal several times. That means that these people have visited Portugal several times in their life, but they're not telling you when they visited Portugal. So those are some other examples of when you'll be using the present perfect. Another grammar error that I saw in a lot of the papers was when to use the passive voice. And the passive voice, it can be a little bit complicated because here is where you're changing a sentence so that the thing or the person doing the action isn't the subject. You're actually putting the subject, the thing that the action is happening to, you're placing that in the position as the subject of the sentence. So it can be a little bit complicated. So here's an example of the passive voice. The Google search engine is used frequently. So we're interested in how often the Google search engine is used, but I'm not saying who is using it. So that means that the Google search engine is actually the object. That means that this is what the action, this is something that's happening to that. Here, the next sentence, the house was built in 1654. So I'm talking about this house. The action of building happened to this house. I'm not telling in this sentence who built it. And then this last example, the road is being repaired. Do I say who repaired the road? No, all I say is the road, that this is the object that the action of being repaired is happening to. See how complicated that is? So my recommendations when it comes to passive voice is that if you can change it to active voice, that is a better way to do it. So here are some examples where I'm listing both the object that the action is happening to and the subject. So the patient was examined by the doctor. So the doctor is actually doing the action. The patient has the action happening to it. This next one, over 200 car accidents last year were caused by sleepy drivers. Sleepy drivers were doing the action. Car accidents were what happened. So we can change these sentences, for example. Instead of saying the patient was examined by the doctor, we can say the doctor examined the patient. In this sentence, we can change it. We can say sleepy drivers caused over 200 car accidents last year. It's much simpler when you can change it to active voice. So my recommendation, if at all possible, if you know who is doing the action or what is doing the action, change passive voice to active voice. And here I've given some examples. The passive voice for this is the kite runner was written by Khaled Hosseini. You can change it. Khaled Hosseini wrote the kite runner. That mural was painted by Melina Suleiman. That's the passive voice. Let's change it. Melina Suleiman painted that mural. And then this last one, the house was built by my father. Change it to active voice. My father built this house. The last common error that I saw for your grammar was capitalization. Some of you were not capitalizing at the beginning of your sentences, and some of you are capitalizing words that didn't need to be capitalized. So there are three most important rules in English for capitalization. And the first one is the beginning of the sentence. Anytime you begin a new sentence, you're going to capitalize that first letter. So the cat is sleeping, there's a capital T there. Here I have 3 sentences in a row so you can see what that looks like. Capital H, hey. Capital I, it's great to see you. Capital H, how have you been? The next time that you'll always be capitalizing, if it's the letter I, when you use it as a personal pronoun. Where did I put that book? That I, even though it's in the middle of the sentence, it always, always, always is capitalized. And then lastly, there are certain proper nouns, such as names of people, businesses, places, months, and days that we always capitalize. So we always capitalize the name of the month. Her birthday's in February. We capitalize days of the week, Thursday. We capitalize people's names, Zainab Fayez. We capitalize names of cities, Kandahar. And we capitalize the names of businesses or organizations, such as Afghan Aid. As you're looking over your papers, you'll see the proofreading marks. And I've used these universal proofreading marks so that anytime in the future, if you're ever doing a writing assignment where you have somebody going back and proofreading, you'll recognize these universal markings. So take a look at these, and I've given examples of what it looks like when we are using these kinds of proofreading marks. So now that you've taken a look at all of the corrections that I've put on your second rough drafts, I want you to make your own notes. So go back over your rough drafts and think about things that you want to change. Write notes in the margins, kind of scribble on things, cross out stuff, and please don't be afraid to make your rough draft look a little bit messy. You'll want to write any notes on it that are going to help you do your final report. And that's then the next step is getting on your laptop and typing that paper. So make sure you're comfortable in your seat. You have your rough draft propped up in front of you or to the side of your laptop. And here are some formatting tips for when you start to type in Microsoft Word. I'll show you on the next page a sample of what your report should look like format-wise. After you've typed up your report, please use spell check. And you know something's spelled wrong, or you might have a question about it. If it's a word in English and there's a squiggly red line like it underneath, you know it's misspelled. If it is, however, a Dari word or a Pashto word or a name of something, you might see a red squiggly line underneath it, but it might not be spelled incorrectly. So make sure you're checking on your spell check for that. Here is a sample of what your report should look like when it's all typed up. So in the top right corner are all the details with your name, the name of the course, my name, and the due date. Centered is the title, which is the name of the project and what type of report it is. Notice here I have these spaced, double spaced, and at the beginning of each paragraph I've indented. And how I form this indent is by simply clicking the tab button once, and it will give me that indent. So this paper is a few paragraphs long. I decided instead of doing one big paragraph to separate the ideas, those supporting details, into separate paragraphs. And that is it. So then I put my conclusion as its own paragraph right here. As soon as you are finished, you should use this final checklist to make sure that everything is client ready and polished in your final report. So those are the checklist items there. And you should be finished. You've been given a little more time to do this final report. I'm giving you an extra week. So you'll type out, or you'll type out the report, print it out, and then submit it to HR no later than Saturday, the 2nd of March. You don't have to hand in all the rest of your worksheet packets this time. All I need is your final report typed on that piece of paper. These worksheet packets from before, you keep those to use as a reference for your future writing projects. And it has been a pleasure working with you. As I said, I'm right here in Kabul, and one of these days I really hope to make it into your office to meet you all in person. Take care and best wishes.